Pranams from Shantikunj, Deva Sanskriti Vishwavidyalaya, Haridwar, India. Let us start with the recitation of the Gayatri Mantra. Gayatri Mantra, as we have discussed before, is the mantra that helps the sadhak to take the right path in the life. There are many paths in the life, and each of them appear promising. Each of them look like that, we should take it. And life is full of these choices, options, possibilities. But which of them is the right one? And right one does not appear right, or right one is not right because it is intellectually right, or it is emotionally right, or it is impulsively right. It is right because it is right as per our karma, sanskar and prarabdha. The only journey that we are in is the journey of the yoga, where each life that we are getting, each janma that we are getting is there for a purpose. It is there so that we can get rid of the additional karma bhara, the additional weight of the karma that we are carrying over our shoulders, and removing them, refining ourselves, reaching back to the point where we realize ourselves, self-actualization, self-realization. That is the purpose of the journey of the life. And that path which helps one to reconnect with themselves, Atma Pratishtha, as Sanskrit says, or Atma Sakshatkar, self-actualization, self-realization, remembering who we truly are. That is the path of yoga. And Gayatri Mantra helps one to take that path. So let us do the Gayatri Mantra together with a sentiment that our paths are brightened and they are illuminated like sun illuminates the darkness of the earth. Gayatri Mantra together. Om Bhurbhuvah Swaha Tatsaveturvarenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhemahe Dheyo Prachodaya. Pranam and welcome to everyone. We started to discuss the second chapter of the Patanjali's Yoga Sutra, Sadhana. And as the name suggests, this is the chapter dedicated to learn the techniques. The first technique that came was of the Kriya Yoga, with the sole purpose of weakening the kleshas. And then Patanjali talked about the different kinds of kleshas, gave their definitions. Then he also gave the mechanism through which the klesh is giving birth to the karma, and then karmasha is being created, and that karmasha is responsible for our seen and unseen janma lives. It is responsible for jati, ayu, bhog, our life, duration, span of life, and the experiences of life. And that Patanjali talked about. And he talked about that, of course, everything appears to be dukkha, suffering, through this understanding. But then that dukkha which is yet to arrive, the pain and anguish that we are yet to experience, that suffering which is yet to knock at our door, he could be sent back. Not the one that we already experienced, that's gone, past now. The one that we are experiencing right now is a manifested one. So it can only be weakened, but it cannot be abolished. It cannot be destroyed. It cannot be completely destroyed, a word that he would use later on called hana. That cannot take place with the dukkha which we are experiencing right now. But we can change the course of action of the one that is yet to arrive, anagat dukkha. So he talks about that. He said the reason for that to occur is because of a conjunction between drishta and the drishya, between the witness and the seen. We were supposed to be the witness, we were supposed to be an observer, we were supposed to be a person, an entity that was just watching this scene to unfold itself, Prakriti to do its own thing, and we were supposed to be the immutable, pure, luminous consciousness. And somehow we confused. Somehow we started to become a participant. Rather than becoming a drishta, we became a karta. We started to take part, we started to join in action. And this association that has taken place called sanyoga, Patanjali says that needs to be broken. And then he defines drishta also. Then he defines the sanyog also. He says the sanyog that takes place, it takes place because of avidya. There is a veil, there is a avarana, there is a covering that covers our point of view of seeing this world. It gives us the wrong impression, this veil gives us the wrong impression that we are a doer, while we were supposed to be the observer. We were only here to observe it, not to take part in it. But avidya makes one to think that they are also, they can join the action. Tasya hetuhu avidya. Patanjali says in the 24th verse that the reason for that to occur is avidya, and that ultimate ignorance, because ignorance could be for smaller things also. It's not knowing what is right, it's actually knowing which is wrong. So it is a ultimate kind of ignorance. It is a belief that is so deep that it gives birth to not one life forms but many life forms, umpteen number of life forms. It continues, it's so deep. So he says tasya hetuhu avidya. So if that is the one that is responsible for everything, then well, we need to tackle that. So he says tad abhavat, absence of avidya. Abhav means absence, devoid. So he says tad abhavat, sanyogaha abhavat. So absence of avidya would lead to absence of sanyog, that connection, that equation that we have created with the Prakriti and Drishya, Hanam. And that leads to absolute, the penultimate, the final freedom. Tad drishya kaivalyam. And then drishta reaches to a state that is called kaivalya. Now he points out about the 4th chapter that would be there. It's the ultimate state. Samadhi and kaivalya are slightly different. In samadhi, all the vrittis of chitta, they are diluted. But it does not mean that the pure consciousness has accomplished its own purpose. I may have nothing to do with the Prakriti, but does not mean that I have realized that what I truly am. I may reach to a state where I have got no further contract and no further business and no further functions and operations. If I have reached to that state, I have reached to the state of samadhi. But that doesn't guarantee that the pure consciousness has also understood its own mechanism. It's also reached to a state of pure consciousness within. Technically, kaivalya is a state where I am aware of awareness only and nothing else. That's it. So then, in that state, nobody is drishta anymore. It's only state, kaival. Nothing is left. Because no one is watching anything. No one is witness to anything. If I am still witnessing something, then I am somewhere there. If I am also gone, there is nothing. Then that state is the state of kaivalya. How would we get that final freedom? Hanopaya. Upaya means measure. How would we get it? What's the way of getting? And Han is the final freedom. So he says, Viveka khyate. Aviplavo hanopaya. That Viveka khyate, where I become an entity We don't know how to define it because I is gone, drishta is gone, karta is gone, there is nothing left. And in that state, he says, a viplava. Viplava means chaos, one that is disturbed. There is no further disturbance, it is absolutely calm. Anupaya. That Viveka Khyati is the way to accomplish that final freedom. Then, if you have listened carefully, then you would know Patanjali never introduces a word if he is not going to give the definition of it in the following verses. He always does it. He brings a new understanding and then he starts to explain it. That's the beauty of Patanjali. He would say, okay, Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodha. Then he would immediately define the vrittis. Then he would define Nirodha, Abhyas Vairagya, Abhyamtan Nirodha. And moment he would define that what you would do with the Abhyas and Vairagya, he would define how he would reach, what is the next step, and then he would define the techniques for it. It's all interrelated. They are such beautifully connected verses that no single word has been used by Patanjali for the sake of using it. They are all there with a very specific intention and with a very divine objective. So now, immediately, Patanjali would talk about how to attain the Viveka Khyati. And before that, he says even something that is so special that no ways of expression could do justice to it. He mentions the 27th verse, Tasya Saptadha Pranta Bhumihi Pragya. Tasya means that person or that entity or that being or that consciousness which has reached to a state of Viveka Khyati. Saptadha, 7 types. Pranta Bhume, ultimate pragya. That person, I would use it for the sake of using it, although he may or may not be a person by then. He has got at that stage also, at that ultimate Pranta Bhumi state, he says he still could have 7 different stages of the pragya, the luminous knowledge that is coming from beyond. Pragya is the insightful, doubtless, the luminous knowledge that is coming from the other dimension, which cannot be defined and described by anything that we know in this world. And just imagine that how special it is. It is very special that he even gives the classification of the final state. I mean, people think, okay, I started to do yoga today and then tomorrow I would have the Kundalini Jagrat and then next day I would be like Buddha and then flying in the sky. Just imagine that he started with the hardest thing possible. Like people think even reaching to a state of Vairag is an accomplishment. And then after Vairag he talked about Abhyas and then other Abhyas, then Ishwar Pranadhan and then also 7 Parikarma and then Sampragyat, Asampragyat, Sabij, Nirbij, Savichar, Nirvichar. It continues. And now even when we have reached to the Vivek Khyati, he said, no, not yet. Don't rush. There is no hurry. This thing has been going on for millions and millions of years. So you cannot be there just in a jump. Need to be patient. So he said, even now there are 7 different stages. What are the stages? First he says, it's not there, but it's not there in the verse of the Patanjali, but it is there in the commentaries. So he says 7 different stages are there. What are the stages? First stage, he says, is the Gyeya Shunya. Gyeya means what is there to be known. Shunya means 0. So, person or sadhak reaches to a state where whatever there was to be known has been known. Nothing is left further to be known. Whatever was there to be known. He has access to the hard drive of the world. He can see everything, feel everything, know everything. Nothing is left for him or her to be known. Gyeya Shunya. Then he says Heya Shunya. whatever was the cause of suffering, Heya means cause. If you remember the words Heyam Dukkham Anagatam, he says, hey, whatever is the cause of suffering, that has also been known. No further cause has been left to be known. Third stage is Prapya, which means whatever was there to be attained has been attained. He has attained everything that was there. Then comes the fourth state, which is Chkirsha Shunya. And he defines it as whatever was there to be accomplished has been accomplished. These first four, Geya Shunya, Heya Shunya, Prapya, Chikirsha Shunya, they all are called Karya Vimukti because they are related to doing something. So nothing is left to be done by the person. Everything that was there to be done has been done. Now whatever is left is related to Chitta. So the remaining three are related to the Chitta Vimukti. First four are related to the Karya Vimukti. Last three are related to the Chitta Vimukti. And fifth, which is the first in Chitta Vimukti, is Kritarthata of the Chitta. I am purposely using the Hindi words because it's going to be difficult to translate them phonetically in English, like in terms of the finding the right word for translation. So I use the right Hindi word, but explanation would help you to understand. Kritarth means accomplishing the purpose. What does it mean? It means that Chitta has accomplished its purpose. What was the purpose of Chitta? Either of the two things, either doing the bhog or apvarg. Chitta can be used to experience the world. We can go and take this path of seeing, feeling or doing whatever we would like to do in this world. That is like, purpose, bhog. Or apvarg. Apvarg means liberation. So now because it has reached to the liberation, it was already doing the bhog earlier on, it has done its purpose. It is redundant now. It has got no further reason to be there. So Chitta reaches to the state where it is not needed anymore. Imagine that state where Chitta is not even needed. Guna Vilinata. So then it becomes diluted into the gunas of the Prakriti. Gone. Dissolved back into the gunas of the Prakriti. And then reaches the final state of kaivalya called Atma Sthiti. Swarupe Avasthanam. If you remember, in the third verse of the first chapter, he says, Tada Drishtuhu Swarupe Avasthanam. The sadhak becomes permanently seated in its true consciousness. That is the state that yogi has reached now. Tasya saptadha pranta bhumih pragya. 27th verse he says that after accomplishing a state of the viveka khyati, person still has these 7 steps to take. Then finally he reaches tadrishah kaivalyam. Then he reaches to a state of kaivalya. And in these 7 states, first 4 are related to whatever needs to be done has been done. And remaining 3 are related to the Chitta. Chitta has served its purpose, redundant now, is dissolved back into the Prakriti's gunas, and only the consciousness has remained connected with the consciousness. And it is interesting that we use these 7 states here because these 7 are very important. There are 7 rishis which have given birth to everything. Even where I am sitting right now is the Tapasya Bhumi. Gurudev chose the place of Shantikunj because it is the place where 7 major rishis which gave birth to all major traditions, all major wisdom traditions of India and possibly everywhere else. They did their whole tapasya, penance, austerity on this very land. That's why this place where Shantikunj is located, it's called Sapta Rishi and Sapta Sarovar. So they are Very interesting. These 7 layers, the 7 chakras, whether you call them, that each are related to the illumination of one particular chakra, or you can call the 7 layers of consciousness like Karbala teachings are mentioning. But whichever way you see this metaphor, the idea is that even at the final state there are 7 steps to take. That's why even in India, when marriage is taking place, the bride and groom, they take 7 steps before entering into the wedding tradition. They call it Saptapadi, that you go through the 7 different steps, and in the same manner there are 7 steps that are being taken now by the sadhak before it reaches to the ultimate, penultimate, the final state. And Patanjali calls it Saptadha Pranta Bhumi Pragya. How would you get that Viveka Khyate? So he comes to the most popularly known tradition or technique of the yoga, which everyone knows about who has been on the path of yoga, called ashtanga yoga. So now in this verse, Patanjali is mentioning the first time yoganga, the limbs of the yoga. So he says yoganga anushtanat ashuddhikshaya jnanadipti aviveka khyate. That by following the practice, anushtanat means the practice, yoganga means limbs of yoga, by following the practice of the limbs of yoga, 2 things happen. Ashuddhikshaya, impurities are removed. Ashuddhi means impurity. What is the impurity? Impurity is not doing something wrong. Impurity that we have actually gathered around us is not remembering who we truly are. We are already pure. Not remembering it is the impurity. So he says ashuddhikshaya. It does to the removal of the ashuddhi, jnana dipti, and giving birth to the inner light. And that process aviveka khyate, that is the viveka khyate. And that's a very interesting verse. It is an interesting verse because these two are interconnected. What Patanjali is saying, that we are already illuminated, but we have got the dust over us. This dust or dirt, just like on the fireball, if the ash covers it, it loses its radiance. But moment you remove the ash, it's back to its luminous form. Same is true with us. We are already illuminated. We already enlightened. It's not something new that we are supposed to get. It's just forgetting or purifying or cleaning that we have wrongfully accumulated. Ashuddhikshaya. That leads to viveka khyate. That's why all the yoganga practices that you would see, all the practices of ashtanga yoga, they are the practices of removing the impurities. All the wrongs that we have gathered around us, they shall be purified, they shall be forgotten. So he says that this yogang anushtanat, and anushtanat is again interesting. Anushthan is a word that we, at least in Gayatri Pariwar, we use very frequently. Everyone is doing some kind of anushtan. And anushtan is a very rigorous, disciplined, strategic practice. For what purpose? For the purpose of unleashing something from within. Like there is already butter inside the milk, but you need to churn it. There are fruits on the trees, but you need to pluck them. There is grain, there are grains inside the land, but you need to plow them. They cannot be given automatically, they need to go through a process. Only by going through the process, that possibility that is there inside can be unearthed, it can be unleashed, it can be unveiled. And that process of unveiling, which is already there but needs additional measure to bring it out, that additional measure is the anushtan. So he says, by following that practice of yoganga, these ashta ang of the yoga, these 8 limbs of yoga, one can do 2 things. One, that impurities are removed, Second, illumined knowledge comes from within. And this is an interesting one because Jnana, he purposely uses the word Jnana Deepti. Why? There is, first understand the word Deepti. Deepti is the light of the lamp. And light of the lamp has a specific quality. Once you light a lamp and you use the matchbox or lighter, whatever you do, you light it. It always follows a specific kind of pattern. There is this flame and there is a bluish kind of hue in the middle of it. It would never be bigger than that. You would never see a flame that big. It would always be that big. It reaches to a state which cannot be expanded anymore. And that is called Deepti. It is a permanent state of radiance. There is no further beyond it. And he uses this word very specifically because you can have the knowledge, you can have the wisdom from other sources also. People can read the Vedas, Upanishad, they can be good in analytics, they could be very good in their own emotive way of thinking, they would have greatest power over the vocabulary. Doesn't mean that it's a illumined knowledge. Illumined knowledge comes from within. So he says that that can only happen if we are able to remove the impurities. So the crux here, so the emphasis here is on removing the impurities. The purpose of the ashtanga yoga is removing the impurities. 3 different types of yoga Patanjali have introduced. First was abhyas, vairagyabhyam, tan nirodha. First chapter, 12th verse. And that is Samadhi Yoga. What does it do? Chitta vritti nirodha. Remember, it does the stilling of the vrittis of the chitta. Then came the second Kriya Yoga, Tapa Swadhyaya Pradhan, second chapter, this chapter that we are talking, first verse. And what is the purpose? The purpose is Klesh Tanu Karanartha. It is the purpose of doing this is to weaken the kleshas. And now Ashtanga Yoga, what is the purpose of Ashtanga Yoga? Purpose of the Ashtanga Yoga is Ashuddhikshaya, removing the impurities so that the illumined knowledge, the Viveka Khyati from inside can shine back. And that is the idea. So the question comes, what are them? So he says yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, samadhi, ashtau angani. Yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, samadhi, you all know. Ashta means 8, anga means limbs. These are the 8 limbs of yoga. You would find the same in the Ayurveda. Ayurveda is based on ashtanga hridaya. There is also ashta anga. There are also 8 limbs. Even the Vedas are based on the anga. There are Vedanga like Shiksha, Nirukta, Vyakarana, Kalpa, Chanda, Jyotish. They are there. They are the Vedanga. They are called the angs of the Vedas. An idea of the anga, limb. What is the idea of the limb? Not only they are important, but they are important as a whole. If I have got my one hand is gone, then not only a limb is gone, an ability of my body to do a certain thing is gone. Now I cannot do a thing from this hand. It's not like only my arm is gone. It's my whole integrity has been broken. Same thing is here. Patanjali is not only saying that these are limbs in terms of stages, they are graded, of graded importance. They are important as a whole. They are important together. Like if somebody has got everything else and he says, oh, I have got Samadhi already. But have you got yam and niyam? No. Then that Samadhi is pointless. First of all, you won't get it. It won't be called Samadhi. Second, if somehow somebody would get it, then it is of no importance. He says it has to be done together. Then only they are of penultimate importance. And these 8 limbs, they are actual process of the graded transformation of the human being. The whole idea of the yam is channelizing one's urja, channelizing one's energy to inside. Rather than that side, it's channelizing towards inside. And what is the purpose of niyam? Niyam gives the discipline to that urja so that it could be used for a specific purpose. And only if my urja, my energy, my power has been disciplined and directed. It needs two things. Yam is giving the direction, niyam is giving the discipline. Then only body could be still. Otherwise you ask people to be still and they are forcing themselves to be still, but there is no asana taking place because they are doing it by forcing, by restraining themselves. So then only a body could be truly still. And if body could be disciplined, directed and still, then only you can work on the prana. Then comes the pranayama. And if you are able to control the prana, then you can control it both ways. Not only going in and coming out, it can control it both ways. Then you can also withdraw the prana from the senses. And withdrawing the prana from the senses is pratyahara. And if I am able to withdraw the prana from the senses, then I can use them, I can point them, I can direct them to be absorbed in one point of concentration, that is dharana. Then only the dhyana could take place. Then my consciousness is flowing towards that object uninterruptedly. And then comes the true samadhi. So these 8 limbs of yoga are not just random things compiled together. They are there with a specific purpose of using the energy of the person, first giving it a direction, then giving it a discipline, then allowing the body to find the right balance, then finding the prana to be balanced, and then after prana withdrawing the prana from the unnecessary use of the senses, and then they are being concentrated on a particular point, dharana, dhyana, samadhi. So these 8 limbs that Patanjali mentions, they are there for a specific purpose. Then comes the yamas. He says ahimsa, satya, asteya, brahmacharya, parigraha, yama. Yama are 5 in number, and the 5s are ahimsa, satya, asteya, aparigraha and brahmacharya. They are could be translated in English, but I would prefer to use the Sanskrit terms so that I can explain it properly. Because Sanskrit is a beautiful language. Before that in India we used the language called Prakrit. And Prakrit means which came naturally. But then it needed to be refined, it needed to be given a meaning. And when it was given a meaning behind, then it was called Sanskrit. Sanskrit means the refinement. So that language came with a specific purpose. So in Sanskrit no word is used for no reason. Ahimsa is the first one. And ahimsa, not only the yogic tradition but Buddha dharma, Jaina dharma, that is there as a central and foremost principle everywhere. It is the most important one. That's why in the Sanskrit scriptures there is a word called ahimsa paramo dharma, that it is the greatest dharma that could ever take place. If you are able to have the ahimsa, you can do everything else. How come? I will tell you in a second. So ahimsa, everyone says is the most important. Vyāsa even uses a very beautiful analogy. He says ahimsa is like the footstep of the elephant. It's so big that it actually covers the footsteps of everyone else. If elephant walks, then if there were footsteps of deers or lions or tigers or bear or anyone, makes no difference. It would cover everything. So he says ahimsa is like the footstep of the elephant, it can cover anything. And ahimsa means, ahimsa, he says, sarva bhutanam anabhidroha. To every single being on this planet, having a desire not to hurt it, that is ahimsa. Not only non-violence. He says not even a thought and emotion taking birth in us, not only an act of non-violence, but even not having a sentiment inside to hurt them, anabhidroha, to do anything that would harm them or hurt them. That's why Mahatma Gandhi used this as the single principle of his life. His autobiography is called My Experiments with Truth and Non-Violence. And it is because of this very principle that ahimsa, non-violence, so not the best translation, but ahimsa, if we use the translation as non-violence, that is the biggest dharma. If you are able to follow it, you are able to follow everything else, and I will tell you in a second. But how? Because it would mean not doing anything hurtful to anything. Anything would mean not only human beings, also the plants, also the other beings, also the beings that were gone, also the beings that are yet to arrive, also to the beings that cannot be seen, and also to yourself. He says, do not start, because many people make the mistake of not being violent to others, but then they start becoming violent to themselves. That is not the idea. He says the idea is to be equally respectful and careful to yourself. Ahimsa leads to satya. Satya is like truthfulness. But then even a detailed definition has been given. Not only there is a saying that comes, Satyam bruyat, priyam bruyat, na bruyat, apriyam, which says apriyam satya. It means that one, it should be the right thing to say. Right thing not only by the vachana, not only by what I am saying, but also from the mind. There should be no discrepancy in what I think and what I say. First he says this layer should not be wrongful, both should be right. Second, it should not be hurtful. He says bhutopaghat is the word that Vyāsa uses. He says it should not bring any kind of hurt and damage to the other person. There comes a very famous story, a story of a saint who was doing the penance, and he had followed the truthfulness all his life, and then he was doing in Samadhi, state of meditation. Some people came running to him, and then they said that some bad people are following us, they may kill us. Can we hide in your hut? And he nodded, said yeah, go. Then these people came and they said that did you see some people running before us? Where did they go? So saint actually thought that I am doing the dharma, I am doing the righteous thing. So he said, if I would tell a lie that I don't know where they have gone, then it would be wrong. So he pointed out towards where they were. So the robbers went and they killed those people. Now when he went up and they were doing the calculation of his karma, they were making an analysis. They said, oh, you have committed a sin of murdering people. He said, how come? I never even did anything wrong to anyone. I always followed a path of satya and ahimsa. They said, no. You hurted those people. You are responsible because you could have chosen to say something else. Even you could have chosen to be in silence in that point. But you decided to tell the truth that led for those people to be killed. So Patanjali says not only the truthfulness, but also the truthfulness that would not hurt anyone. Ahimsa. Because it is also underpinning ahimsa. That's why the analogy is used, ahimsa as the parama dharma. Because if one is following the path of ahimsa, his satya would also be full of ahimsa. His truthfulness would also be with a feeling of not hurting someone. Then comes the asteya. And asteya is famously translated as not stealing. He says, no, that's a very superficial translation. Not stealing, but having a desire to steal is equal the same. I may not get I may not have, I don't know whether the word courage is the right, but many people want to steal, but they don't have the guts to steal. They cannot go and just steal from somebody's house. So that doesn't mean that if you have the desire and you have the thought and you have the willingness to do it, but you are not doing it, does not mean that you have reached to aste. He said it should also have a feeling of aspriha, that it doesn't belong to me. I shouldn't even bother about it. And I should not take something from someone that would bring hurt or damage to that person. And that would mean even the knowledge. That would mean even the sentiments and emotions. So he says aste has got deeper meaning. Again, underpinning thought is ahimsa. Then comes the brahmacharya. Many people translate brahmacharya as celibacy. It's not that simple. Brahmacharya means, charya means way to live. Brahma means like divine. It's a divine way of living. Person who is not hurting anyone, following a path of truthfulness, has got no desire to take anything from anyone, he is living a divine way. And then comes the aparigraha. Aparigraha means not only that not accumulating things. Many people just translate it as not accumulating. Not even bothering about something that was mine and something that is gone. It was never mine, so why should I even worry about it? There comes a very interesting story. Story is of a famous king in India called Janak. And once a sadhu came to check that how come Janak, being a king, is such a famous yogi. So he went to see Janak, and Janak was going to take a bath in the river. So he followed Janak. And he only had one loin cloth. So sadhu was not wearing anything, only had one pair of loin cloth that he left in the mansion of the King Janak. And when they reached to the river, in the river, Janak, king and sadhu, they both started to take the bath. They were taking a dip in the river. And suddenly a sevak, a servant came running and said to King Janak, he said, "Sir, your mansion is on fire. It's burning down." Moment sadhu heard this, he rushed back to the mansion that my loincloth is there. He only had one pair of loincloth. And he rushed to get the loincloth. Then he saw the King Janak. He was still taking the bath. Not even a singest, a smallest kind of worry came to his face. He was just in the same phase. He was still taking. So he went to him and said, "Are you not going? Your mansion is on fire." Janak said, "It was never mine. How can it be mine now?" Aparigraha. Sadhu realized that I am running for a loincloth, and this guy, his whole mansion is on fire. He doesn't even think that it belongs to me. It was never mine, so even if it is gone, then who cares? So Patanjali says, ahimsa, satya, aste, brahmacharya, aparigraha, yama. Then he gives one of the most strongest statements that you would see in any yogic scripture. He says, jati, desh, kal, samay, anavichinna, sarvabhaum, mahavratam. Mahavrat means great vows, greatest vows. They are used exactly with the same accolade and same upadhi. In Jain tradition, in Buddha tradition, they are called Mahavrat. And he says Sarvabhaum. Sarvabhaum means universal, everywhere. They are persistent, pervasive, universal. And Anavichinna, which I will explain in a second because it's a very strong statement. He says Jati means category, Desh, place, Kal and Samay is time and circumstances, Anavichinna, not limited to. So Patanjali is saying these vratas, which one? The one that we just talked about. Ahimsa, Satya, Brahmacharya, Aparigraha, Aste. He says they are not only universal, they are not only limited to any kind of category, place, time, circumstances, also they are non-negotiable, anavichinna. Not only you are supposed to follow them, but breaking them would mean that you are not following the path of yoga. And nobody can be as strict and straightforward as Patanjali has been. Jati, how would jati would mean? Like somebody would say, okay, I am from a particular religion and I cannot eat like a particular kind of meat, but I can eat another kind of meat. No. Says no. If you are vegetarian, you are supposed to be vegetarian regardless of it. Desh, I say no, it only belongs to the people in India. It has got nothing to do with people in Italy or nothing to do with people in Pakistan. He said, makes no difference. They are same. Time, circumstance, same. He says, do not bring an excuse. You are supposed to follow it. And there is no exception to it. They are non-negotiable. He says that do not come with an application that I cannot do it. Nobody is going to listen to it. They are non-negotiable. They are permanent, they are universal, and they are the greatest vows. If you are a follower of the path of yoga, this is the first state and first stage you are supposed to follow. They are the Mahavrat. So, we talked about that if you are there to create the absence of the avidya, it leads to Hanam. And the way to get the Hanam, the final freedom, is Vivek Khyati. Vivek Khyati, he talked about even 7 states of the insightful knowledge. Then comes the Yoganga, Ashtanga Yoga. He introduces them and names them. And then we talked about the first Yoganga, Yama. And purpose of the Yama is to give the direction. So we talked about 5 yamas that he also declares as non-negotiable, universal, and Mahavrat. They are the Mahavratas, greatest vows. So we end here today. Thanks for patiently listening. We do the Shanti part together. Om Dyo Shantirantahariksha Shantehe Prithavehe Shantirapah Shantiroshadhayah Shantehe Vanaspatayah Shantirvishvedevah Shantirbrahma Shantehe Sarvagvam Shantehe Shantireva Shantehe Sama Shantiredhe Om Shantehe 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 Sarvarishta Sushantira Bhavatu.
हमारे YouTube चैनल शांतिकुंज वीडियो गायत्री परिवार को सब्सक्राइब करें एवं बेल आइकन जरूर दबाएं ताकि गायत्री परिवार की विभिन्न गतिविधियों की जानकारी आपको मिलती रहे।